Look at this prosperous, ripe world. All of it an open market at my command. Yes, the future of these people depends upon me. Jacobs, update me on the status of Project Doom.
Yes, sir. Progress is as scheduled. However, there is one small problem. One of the subjects has escaped, and we haven't been able to locate it yet.
Find it and cancel it. This operation cannot be compromised.
Yes, sir.
How is he doing?
He spends most of his time with them. Should I bring him to you? It may be about time.
No, leave him alone. He will come, just as I did 30 years ago. It's raining.
And that's all the intro we get. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Play Vice Project Doom. Hart, Maniac and loose in Area D on Route 246. Take him down, nice and easy.
Yeah, I got him. Just what I needed, another nutcase loose in the city. It's showtime!
So this game doesn't exactly give us a very good intro because it's already got a mini-game stage to start off with. We actively start off in a driving stage. You can fire off your shots that go across the entire screen vertically, and your job is to wreck as much shit as possible. While these look like they might be civilian cars, they technically probably are, they'll each drop a coin more or less. 100 coins gives you an extra life, but also sometimes they'll drop turkey, which is effectively a high HP recovery. But occasionally they'll also drop letters like B and G. Those are ammunition for your sub-weapon types we'll talk about once we get into the side-scrolling stages. As for the driving stages, as few as they are, the main mechanic they have that's kind of unique is you actually have like a gear shift system, which is the 1, 2, and 3 on the bottom of the screen. When you press the A button, you shift from 1 to 2 to 3, and I think then back to 2 to 1. Those influence your acceleration ramp as well as your movement speed left to right, effectively. Also up and down, but I tend to stay at the bottom of the stages when I can, effectively. I tend to stay at 2 because I think that's a healthy medium of speeds, but if you're trying to get around projectiles, 3 can be pretty useful, but if you're trying to make your shots more accurate, 1's probably the better bet in the long run. And that's stage 1 already. That boss fight fires projectiles, they're very easy to avoid.
Oh well, should have surrendered while he had the chance. There's no record of this guy, but his hands? His fingers were twisted. They weren't human. More like claws. And that gun he carried. Talk about the creeps. Chrissy, can you run check on that stuff we found in the vehicle?
Sure.
Who's there? Show yourself.
Don't worry, just your guardian angel. And now we get our title screen because this game tries to be a movie in a lot of regards. Vice Project Doom's main form is as a Ninja Gaiden-like. With that said, it's got its own little unique systems going on compared to even a lot of those. For one thing, you have 3 weapons at all times you can swap between with the select button. Your short-range option in your main weapon is going to be your energy whip, which is effectively your sword, very fast firing, good for boss fights, but very short range. When you press select once, you swap over to the pistol. Decent rapid fire, but it doesn't go all the way across the screen, but since it's so straight ahead, it's very easy to hit things straight ahead of you from at a distance from them. The third weapon are grenades. They are very long range. You could throw them about half a screen away from you. But they have a bit of a weird arc, but they do a lot of damage because they leave a bit of a lingering explosion. With that said, your gun and grenades are limited, but enemies drop them so frequently you might as well use them all the time. Even though I'm very bad about doing that at times, I will openly admit. And on top of that, enemy drops in this game are, let's say, reliable, because every enemy will always drop the same thing, even after a death on a screen. For instance, this pumpkin jack-looking guy here will always drop a piece of turkey for healing. That was almost a death just then, I'm fairly certain. You do get more gun ammo in the long run than you do grenades, and you do lose your stock up of it when you die up to a certain point. With that said, time for our first boss fight, this werewolf. The werewolf's main attack when it's not trying to jump across the screen to do more of it is throwing girders at 3 heights. High, medium, and low. You can jump on top of the low ones, you can just walk underneath the high ones, but the medium ones require you to do a duck walk where you hold diagonally downwards as you run. And Hart will kind of just duck his head and shoulders down, and he'll lose about somewhere between a third and a quarter of his sprite's height. I often forget you can do that, but that's your best friend for dodging a lot of projectiles.
What's going on around here? Christy!
Sorry, it's me, Sophia. Christy asked me to check out that stuff. And what I've been able to find all leads to Kimron.
Kimron?
Rumor has it that he practices black magic. So that cutscene's a little interesting. That allows me to quickly talk about this game's script. Namely, this game was released as Vice Project Doom in the West, but in Japan it's known as Gun-Dec, which is stylized as Gun-Dec. Its script was relatively different in a lot of ways, but it was also very much the same, because a lot of the ways they talk about things come across the exact same way, just usually worded better or with slightly more detail talked about them. I should note that there's actually a fan translation of Gun-Dec, by, I believe it's Stardust Crusaders over on romhacking.net, which is almost the version of the game I LP'd, but I decided to go with this version just because talking about the fan translation in this case makes it a little more interesting, because this way we get to see both the horrid English dialogue, while also still talking about the changes. For a good look at that, outside of just watching fan translation playthroughs to begin with, I'd also recommend checking out Proton John's LP of the game from a few years back, because he goes pretty in-depth with the changes and shows off a lot from both versions in the finale of that particular LP, if memory serves. To talk of my experience of the game really quick, though, this is a game like a couple of others we've done recently, like Guardian Legend, where I first found out about this through the Pat Contry Ultimate Guide to NES Games book, when I read a PDF of that several years back. Which is like a look over of a lot of the official and unofficial games, as well as giving slight reviews to all of them, and I just saw this and went, that looks like Ninja Gaiden, I'm gonna play that. Boss 2 is the wizard, Kimron. He jumps to the middle, left, or right of the screen and either does a dash across or a fire breath attack that you can just get right in front of him and duck under and can be completely safe. A lot of the bosses in this game can actively seem pretty chaotic, but they usually all have a trick or two you can just figure out really quickly to make them a complete non-issue. Hart! Guess what I came across? That rogue driver's gun turned out to be military issue. Army top secret. Oh, and guess what the boys in forensics found?
They found out what's in this stuff?
No, not yet. But they said the dirt found on his clothes is native to South Central America.
South Central America?
Well, there's been some news of trouble coming out of this town called Ricardo. Might be worth checking out.
Well, even though it's a little early in this season, I guess my vacation's going to be spent in Ricardo.
And now we're on our way to the airport. This game's stages move by really quickly. The game overall, I'd say, is much easier than your average Ninja Gaiden. Like to compare it, I'd say it's easier than Power Blade, even, to compare that to Ninja Gaiden. But it'll definitely sneak up on you towards endgame. With that said, because enemies drop health relatively regularly in either the turkey form or the little health potions, usually they give you enough supplies to outlast the longer screens pretty reliably. If anything, your biggest causes of instant death are going to be falling into bottomless pits or things like that. Also, just make sure you don't forget you have the other 2 weapon types, because on my first playthrough and even to this day, I still find myself forgetting that from time to time because I'm just so used to only having the base sword in games like this. Admittedly, this game's own variety in its levels can also sometimes help with that. Speaking of which...
Come on, boys. Let's party.
The side-scrolling and the driving isn't the only thing this game has to offer. It also has... I guess Hogan's Alley is a good thing to compare this to. We got an on-rails shooter. Move the reticle around, blasting non-stop, and kill any enemies you see. With that said, every shot does take up some of your actual gun ammo, but enemies around here drop bombs and gun ammo so often, you're probably not going to run out. Not a bad place to get your actual coins for level ups, not level ups, extra lives as well. There's some destructible environments, there's enemies that are in various different distances from the screen that have different attacks. Some jump at you, some throw grenades, some just try to stab you outright. If you're good about shooting things the moment they come on screen, or at least quickly after that, there's not a lot to fear here. Honestly, these are probably the easiest sections of the game on the whole, if only because enemies drop health so frequently that they're also very short. South Central America. Reminds me of my mercenary days. This game's cutscenes really feel like they wanted to make something that was actually more movie adjacent than even the original Ninja Gaiden, but without any of the connecting tissue, if that makes sense. Although this actually seems like it would have been a really fun B-movie. This level brings in one annoying enemy type. I think this is the first level with them at least. Birds! Good old Ninja Gaiden birds. They do fly away after a little bit, but they're still birds and thus can hit you from any angle and thus can probably hit you while you're jumping over a bottomless pit and send you to your demise. In the meanwhile, let's talk about this game's developer. This game was developed by ICOM, which was later renamed to Yume Kobo after they were funded by SNK for a little bit. They were a part of the Sammy Corporation, which was another video game developer that eventually merged with Sega back in 2004 to become Sega-Sammy. Nowadays, Sammy themselves only really do pachinko-related stuff, I think. But ICOM at the time was also a subsidiary of Jaleco. They developed a couple of games of note over the years. The Moffat Conspiracy, which was a sequel to a Golgo 13 NES game. This, totally rad. But they developed a game I did on the channel not that long ago. I think about a year and a half ago at this point. They did Blaster Master Boy / Blaster Master Jr. or Bomberman King, Scenario 2 as it was called over in Japan, which was a sequel to a spin-off of Bomberman that was released over here as Robo Warrior. Just fun little, hey, it's nice to see you guys again kind of deals. Once SNK entered the picture and started funding them, ICOM themselves broke away from Sammy and did a lot of Neo Geo Pocket Color games, usually. Blazing Star, Biomotor Unitron, SNK Gallus Fighter, just a bunch of SNK games just outright. Some of them are pretty neat, but admittedly didn't get as much praise because, well, they were on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which, neat little handheld. Definitely not that big of a success. Once we reach this particular tile set, there is one more hazard you need to keep an eye out for, which are these vines you can slash at that regenerate after a few seconds. You really have to be constantly moving while slashing your energy web to get through them in a good timely manner. The first few cases of them aren't too bad, although occasionally knockback will still sneak up its ugly head like that. But there are some cases where there's just a lot of them in a row and it's hard to get through them without getting hit. So when you die, you get sent back to your last checkpoint, which in most cases in this game is actually the start of the screen you were just in anyway. Although if you die in some boss fights, if not all boss fights, you get sent back to the start of the previous screen more often than not. Which isn't that bad because that gives you a chance to stock back up on any ammunition in the case the enemies drop that, but since enemies have set drops anyway, how reliable that is depends on the level, ultimately. Though at the end of the day, this game also still has the Ninja Gaiden continue system where you can press start after a game over and you'll just start back at the start of the stage you were on anyway. So this is one of those games where war of attritioning your way through it is a very viable strat to get through it, and honestly, since again this is easier than basically any Ninja Gaiden game on the NES straight up, and a lot of other games in this general genre, you can get through this pretty reliably, I'd say. With that said, this being a game of its era, its manual actually has a pretty in-depth plot synopsis, but it also has some character bios to read, so let's actually start with those because we're coming up on the boss fight. Namely, Hart himself. Vice Officer Quinn Hart has been on the force for several years. He has an uncanny knack for getting out of tight spots. Some of the other officers often joke about him being superhuman. Next up is Christy. This Vice Officer is probably one of the sharpest of the force. She often works with Hart and Reese to solve tough crimes. Christy is also Hart's latest and longest flame. And then Sophia, an associate of Christie. Sophia managed to show up in some of the most unusual places. Officers joke at her ability to track anyone, anywhere. For now, this is the boss fight. This one actually has a name in the manual. This is the M5 Scorpion. Its weak spot's the glowing tip at the end of its little tail. It'll fire mines out of the top of it that kind of leave left and right as it moves, while firing a pulse cannon out of its front. You can duck under the pulse cannon, but I am so aggro on this boss fight, I often just forget to do that. That's what I'm talking about with the checkpoints being usually the screen before a boss, by the way. If you're quick about just jumping over it in a good pattern or only attacking it while it's moving, though, this fight doesn't really get to do much, honestly. You can just duck beneath these shots while it's moving left and right and you'll be completely safe.
What the? An El Grande welcoming party. Feels almost like home. Not bad. Not bad at all. It's amazing what they can do with brick these days.
This is the stage where I'd say the game starts to get a lot harder, at least with the amount of projectiles they're throwing at you, because we're going to start getting these red enemies that jump up from the bottom of the screen up to the top and just throw 3 kunai at you. They often jump up in places where it's pretty hard to hit them or predict them coming, so I'd actually just recommend tanking the hits in most cases, especially later on towards the end game. But the annoying thing here is we also have these fans on the top and bottom of the screen. They are hazards themselves, but they'll often have ladders moving between them. Ladders in this game are a little weird, at least from my experience, in that usually whenever I'm jumping towards a ladder in a game, I will hold up to grab onto it. You grab onto them automatically, and because of that, I'll often get onto them and almost fall off immediately because I'm just not expecting to just grab on. So as long as you keep in mind that you grab on automatically, they're not too bad to deal with. It's really these ones that are between things where that can become an issue, because if you jump onto one too high and then hold up, you're going to climb into the hazard and take damage, if not be instant killed, so watch out for that. With that said, let's go back to the manual and read its story. A small band of alien survivors landed on Earth several centuries ago. In order to survive in this new environment, they produced a neon green gel which provided nourishment. In an effort to blend into human society, they developed clones. As centuries passed, Beta Corporation, that's B-E-D-A Corporation, came into being. This was a company which manufactured and distributed electronic and technological equipment. However, behind all this, the company was also responsible for the maintenance of the alien race. The neon gel had a very different effect on humans. It became a substance that was sought after by some of the world's wealthiest abusers. The gel is mass-produced by Beta Corporation for profit, but the side effects proved to be lethal for human abusers. That is the stuff in question, I'm assuming, by the way, that they talk about in the story, which, given the name Project Vice, drug allegory. Vice Officer Quinn Hart, along with his partner Detective Reese, set out on an assignment to locate the manufacturers of this mysterious gel. During the investigation, Reese disappears. Since his body has never been found, he's believed dead. Now, Hart must go alone to uncover the source of the gel and the force behind it. His skills, nerves, and ultimately fate are at stake in this deadly plot for survival. Well, that explains the Reese character that got brought up earlier in his own bio. But for now, it's time for our next boss fight. This is the PCU-100 Vardkin. It dashes to the top and then to the opposite side of the screen in some sort of arcs while firing missiles at you. You can just crouch in front of it at any point in time, though, and be safe, because if you just spam fire the whip at that point, any of the missiles that are homing in on you from above will get hit by the whip and thus get destroyed and not be able to damage you. As long as you're super aggro in this fight with your B button mashing, this isn't much of a threat whatsoever, honestly. Hart, go, danger. That voice, Reese? What the? I thought you were... Wished I were... What happened to you? I found source green slime. Who did this to you? Set up. It's a man with your face. He... Reese!
Still keeping watch on you, Hart.
Where'd he go? Reese!
Hart.
Reese, you gotta hang on.
The girl. They've got her. Save her before too late.
Reese! Reese! What the? What does this have to do with anything?
Sammy's the ultimate villain. I gotcha. So yeah, that's why I read those character bios in that plot before right then, because then that character just comes out of absolutely nowhere. Same with the green slime topic, honestly. The game, a lot of games didn't talk about their entire plots in the game themselves. Usually they left that in the manual, but it can be a little weird at times if you don't read the manuals because of that. That's why I always read the manuals growing up whenever I picked up a game from GameStop. Like, I have distinct memories of waiting for my mother outside of a Bed Bath & Beyond while she was in there right after I picked up Metroid Other M, reading the manual. Also, just to mention it, the previous cutscene has a little bit of an added detail in the Japanese release. Reese doesn't just shake and die out of nowhere. He's actively getting shot. There's a bullet that travels across the screen in the Japanese version of that cutscene. The train section here is actually a very good indicator of distances for how you should use your sub-weapons, because there's going to be enemies like these guys with guns that you should just shoot with either your gun or hit with grenades from a distance instead of just trying to run up in their face. Again, I'm just very aggressive, and because I'm not used to having sub-weapons like the gun and grenade in this game, in other games of this genre, I often just forget they're there. And now we're in the sewers randomly. We got jumping fish, we got water that pushes you, the usual stuff, really. For now, though, let's start talking about the game's staff. With that said, they're all listed as just staff. Their exact work on the game isn't known, but we can probably figure it out just by looking at their other roles, what they worked on. First off, there's Hiroyuki Okada, who worked on this, Robo Warrior, so the first of the two Bomberman King games, Hoops, Amagon, Ultimate Basketball, and Football Fury. They're a programmer in all the other games, so they're probably one of the programmers for this. After that, we got Kiyoshi Yokoyama, who, this was actually their last project. They also worked on 64th Street, A Detective Story, The Cryon Conquest, Taking to the Hope, The Astyanax, which was another ICOM game, Amagon, Hoops, and XX Mission. They're a composer on all those other games, so they're probably the composer for this game. Next up is where we start getting to the people who are still working on to games to this day, with Tsutomu Nakazawa. This is one of their earlier projects, probably their fourth game overall after Hoops, Mafat, Conspiracy, and Ultimate Basketball. All their other work is in graphics art, so I'm assuming they were one of the sprite artists and background artists for the game. They worked on some interesting games later on in their career, though. White Knight Chronicles 1 and 2 on the PS3, Street Fighter V, they were a mat supervisor and environment modeling supervisor. Tekken 7, they're a background lead. Yakuza Kiwami 2, they're a senior artist. In Labyrinth of Galeria, they were an enemy setup director, so they're still doing stuff to this day. For now, though, time for the boss fight, which is actually the last boss fight that's named in the manual. This is the PCU 110 Rogue. This thing does the same pattern every time. It moves left or right across the screen in an arc, goes down, fires a shockwave that really hurts, goes up, fires a spread shot from Contra downwards, and then goes over and repeats it. If you stay directly like where I am right now and just duck under the shockwaves, you can stay completely safe from a lot of projectiles pretty easily, and once again, spam fire your whip to drain its health pretty quickly. This fight will take a little longer doing this instead of just chasing it around, but ultimately it is safer, so I prefer to do this. Just again, watch out for that shockwave attack, because that will really drain your health quickly. You can also use grenades in cases like this when it goes far away from you, because you can get a good 2 hits in with that, but that depends on how gutsy you are.
Don't make any sudden moves. Where's the girl? I want answers, now. Don't play games with me. Where is the girl?
And that's all he does. He just laughs, and I guess then we're done with him. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to go finish